lot to take in about the Cushman substation, and we're going to do our best to cover as much as we can. And I think the first thing that we have to do before we do any of this is to acknowledge that where we are is the ancestral land of the Puyallup tribe. They have been here, lived here, and given stewardship to these lands since time immemorial. They are still here today, and it is part of our mission to acknowledge and uplift the experiences and the voices of the tribe, recognizing that land acknowledgement is just one small step in the right direction of actual allyship. Today, I have so many people to introduce and kind of welcome on this whole thing, because if you take away anything from this, it's that it is a big project that has been community-led from the start. When this beauty was built, the idea of a public utility was kind of revolutionary. They had transitioned from the time of just kind of letting any grifter run power and electricity, and then taking that and giving it back to the people. So this is a building that was really designed by the community, facilitated by the community, and then run by the community from the start. So there's a lot of cooks in this kitchen, and I'm gonna do my best to kind of acknowledge them all really quick, if I can. So while you're going around, first thing you'll notice is everybody's involved here today. There's lots to do. Free ice cream, a pretty good video explaining this project. Free ice cream for kids.
Thank you.
I'm so sorry. It's not for kids at heart. It's for actual children, which I think we're okay with. But also, I would like to introduce some of our council members today. Is Council Member John Hines here? Hi, good to see you. Would you like to say anything really quick? Good luck. Very confident you guys.
Test. Okay.
Wait, well,
Let's see.
it's like the right Bermuda Triangle.
All right. I think this is the location where the microphone works. It does. All right. Well, good morning and welcome to the Cushman Substation and for the Cushman Historic Street Fair. I want to first begin by making some thank yous. First of all, I want to thank the North Neighborhood Council for being a co-sponsor of this event. So let's give a round of applause for the North End Neighborhood Council here. And then also I want to thank my colleagues from the City Council who are here with me today, and you're going to hear from a few of them, but Deputy Mayor Walker, yes, Councilmember Rumbaugh, and Councilmember Diaz, who's here, because this past Tuesday we sponsored a council contingency request to help fund this day today. We're very excited about it, so I want to thank them for supporting me in that. I'm going to be very brief and just say I'm very excited for all of us to be back together here today talking about the future of this wonderful community asset. As we thought earlier, this was an investment in the future of our city. It was made almost a century ago by people who really thought about innovative ways to make Tacoma a better place and to really invest in public assets. And so as we look ahead for the future of this, I really just encourage us to think about what the future of this site's going to be. We're going to have a public outreach process coming up here the next year to think about what do we do with the future of this wonderful public asset? How can we put this property into further service for our community for another century? So thank you all for being here today. This is not the end, but this is just the beginning for the future of this site. So thank you and have a wonderful day and enjoy. Hopefully we don't have rain for a little while. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Councilmember Sarah Rumbaugh, District 2, and we are adjacent and part of District 1 and Proctor. And I want to thank everyone for being here, and I also want to thank you for your patience. I know this is something we've wanted to see happen for a long time. What's the future of Cushman Substation? This is a beautiful building. I appreciate what this means for the history and the legacy of Tacoma. And we're going to have an opportunity with all of your neighbors and the rest of the city to look at what do we want this to be in the future. So I hope that you'll all use this as an opportunity to hear about the history of Cushman Substation. I think we're going to hear from Bill Barsma, right? And he's amazing, one of our former mayors. We really appreciate him and everything he's done for historic preservation in Tacoma. And my hope is that you will stay engaged with this project. I know that Jody, she has, made this happen with the North End Neighborhood Council, and I really appreciate everything that they're doing to get this out, the history, the legacy, and what the public engagement part will be for this. I know that Councilmember Hines, he has been such a champion for District 1 and the Proctor District, and I know that this means a lot to you. And I want you to know that the council's listening, and the other people who are here today from the council, Councilmember Olgie Diaz and Deputy Mayor Walker, both care as much as we do about this. So thank you so much for letting me have a couple minutes of your time, and I will pass it off.
I believe our deputy mayor would like to say
She supports
everything we're doing today. So,
Man, it's just me.
all right. Why is historic preservation work important? I feel like I have to justify this every day, but here's the thing. Tacoma has a reputation that it doesn't deserve sometimes. And it is an incredible city, full of a rich history and integrity, and has been a pioneer on a lot of different fields. And this building is an iconic part of that. And so by preserving this narrative here, we are maintaining our own story and rededicating ourselves to a future where we understand what that story is. And a lot of people have gone into preserving the history of Tacoma. The ones that I really want to acknowledge today, Michael Sullivan has been instrumental. That deserves a round of applause. Also, our current City of Tacoma Historic Preservation Officers, Ruben McKnight and Susan Johnson. I also personally want to acknowledge Lauren Hoopgamer, who I know is out here somewhere working tirelessly. Good to see you. As well as historic preservationist and architect Jeff Ryan, who is the one who successfully nominated the Cushman for historic preservation and national recognition. As well as Historic Tacoma, who has been instrumental recently in nominating the Nettie Asbury House for registration, as well as, our Proctor District and McKinley Hill Board building inventories, Kathleen Booker, Ross Griffith, Stephen Treffers, and then, of course, Steve Dunkelberger and Dr. Bill Barsma. And Marshall McClintock. Thank you, Jody. I think we're going to have an opportunity now to hear from one of our champions of historic preservation, former Mayor Dr. Bill Barsma, if he is available. Good to see it. Front row is my blind spot, apparently. Come on up.
So, Chris, can you move the chair over?
So when I graduated from the University of Puget Sound back in 1964, prior to going to graduate school, I worked for the Tacoma Public Utilities. I was the assistant to the Director of Public Information, and so I had the opportunity to follow what was going on with the utilities back in 1964, which is a huge year for TPU, because it was then that the utility was constructing the Mossy Rock Dam on the Cowlitz River. It was the second dam Mayfield had been built, and it was the largest and most ambitious project for TPU during that particular time, of course. And currently TPU does own and operate 7 hydroelectric.
So I mentioned that in 1964 I was working for TPU, and again they were the construction of the largest hydroelectric dam in the system, the Mossy Rock Dam. If you ever have the opportunity to see it, I would urge you to visit it. It's one of the largest hydroelectric dams in the world. Another engineering marvel from TPU. But today I'm going to talk about the Cushman project on the upper fork of the Skykomish River. It was considered an engineering marvel at the time, truly an engineering marvel, particularly for a city of less than 100,000 people. But it has a dark side to the story as well, which needs to be told, needless to say. And it's that side of the story that more recently TPU is trying to address, much to its credit, by the way. And that involves the relationship with the Skykomish Tribal Council. For those of you who are really interested in a deep dive into the history of the Cushman project, and by the way, it's worth a deep dive if you're a history buff, I will call to your attention to a book that was published by TPU called A History of the Cushman Hydroelectric Project, Tacoma Power, the Skykomish Tribe, and the Skykomish River, written by Paul Sadin, who's a historian. An excellent read. It really is an unabashed narrative of not only the engineering that went into the Cushman project, but also the role of the Skykomish tribe as well. And there's a chapter devoted to the tribe that's an important read, needless to say, for anyone who really wants to learn about this project. It wasn't the city of Tacoma, by the way, that really looked at the Skykomish, the upper fork of the Skykomish, as the ideal site for a hydroelectric project. It was the city of Seattle. And as a matter of fact, the city of Seattle in 1910 took the initial steps in planning a project on that part of the Skykomish. They hired a major engineering firm, and that firm checked all of, had a series of metrics, and each of them checked out as that site being ideal for a hydroelectric project. The city of Seattle moved forward. The city council looked favorably on it for a while, and then in 1912, the city decided it wasn't economically feasible. And so Seattle walked away from that project and focused on the Skagit River, where its hydroelectric facilities now stand. If you're familiar with the city of Seattle and Seattle Power, you know that its its dams are on the Skagit River. So in 1919, the city of Tacoma took that engineering project, engineering appraisal, and decided it was going to take on the challenge of building a hydroelectric facility on that river. Now think about that for a moment. Even now, where that river is located and how to get to it, it's difficult. It's up close to the Olympic Mountains. It's in a forested area. It's difficult to get there. And back during that period, there were no roads or easy access to that site. Although I will say that on the original Cushman Lake, there was a wonderful hotel that stood on that lake that people from all over the country, particularly in the Northwest, visited. A beautiful original and natural Lake Cushman that stood there. So that area was generally, people knew about the area, but it was not easy to get there. So the city decided to move forward. The citizens of Tacoma, a city, by the way, of less than 100,000, Seattle had over 300,000 people. They decided to walk away, deciding it was economically not feasible. The city of Tacoma, with less than 100,000 people, decided to move forward. By the way, the Cushman project was not the first project for Tacoma City Light. There was a dam on the Nisqually at that time, LeGrand 1, that stood on the Nisqually. It was built in 1912, by the way. And that was considered an engineering marvel. 1912, that was an engineering miracle, the same year that the Titanic sank, which was a disaster of engineering. The city of Tacoma pulled off what many thought was impossible in putting a dam on the Nisqually River and essentially providing power, for low-cost power for the city of Tacoma. In fact, Tacoma became known as the Electric City because of that dam that was built in 1912. And there was a lot of development that was planned and ongoing in the city of Tacoma, to a point where the leaders of the city realized that they didn't have enough power, enough electricity to continue to become the electric city. So they decided to pick up the mantle from the city of Seattle and begin a project on the Skykomish River. The State Department of Fisheries was vehemently opposed to it because it would destroy the salmon run, which it did. The Skykomish tribe was vehemently opposed to it because it would wreak havoc to its tribal territory. So it opposed the construction of the dams. Lawsuits were filed, and the state Supreme Court, in a rather interesting decision, decided in favor of Tacoma, claiming the state had no real interest which is kind of a bizarre decision when you think about it. But in any event, as a result of that state Supreme Court decision, construction began, and the city decided that it would not build one dam on the Skykomish. They decided to build 2 dams on the Skykomish. And so not only did this city of less than 100,000 decide to take on something that Seattle decided not to take on, but they decided to double the project. Think about that. Decided to double the size of the project by building not 1, but 2 hydroelectric facilities. Construction began in 1922. Think about that. They had to move 500 construction workers and all of that materials up into the hinterlands to build that. They had to essentially shut off the river and build a tunnel so that they could actually construct that dam. And as a matter of fact, they finally did construct the first hydroelectric dam, Cushman 1, which began to provide power in 1926. And I forget the exact date, but it was Keep Cool with Coolidge, who pushed the button in the White House on that fateful day. Literally tens of thousands of people in their Model Ts were down there, right there where the power lines crossed the Narrows Bridge, to await the moment of magic when the White House essentially, Keep Cool with Cal, pushed the button to electrify those lines. By the way, the lines that crossed the Narrows, that was the longest span in history at that time, in the world. Longest span in the world at the time, certainly the longest over salt water. And those towers that were designed over 300 feet high were designed to withstand hurricane winds, which another project just to the south was not designed, as we well know, as we well know. And so it was in 1926 when that power, and by the way, at that point, Tacoma had the cheapest electric power of any city in the country, a city of less than 100,000. And so Tacoma once again claimed the title of Electric City. And by the way, those lines came 40 miles from Mason County, by the way, those initial lines. The second dam, Cushman 2, was completed in 1930. And if you go up to Hood Canal, many of you have been up the canal, as you go past Tawana State Park, heading toward Union, you see those 2 silver pipes down the side of the hill. Those are penstocks, and then eventually you get to Union, and you see, well, wait a minute, what, Tacoma Power? What are they doing in Mason County? You know, if you're uninitiated, and it's the Tacoma Power generators from Cushman 2, the second Cushman Dam, and those penstocks take the water and that powers those generators just along Hood Canal. And I say people probably are still amazed. What is the city of Tacoma doing in Mason County, for crying out loud? Well, that's the Cushman 2 dam. So needless to say, the dark side, of course, is that those dams ruined and eviscerated the salmon runs. And, of course, covered much of the land that was a part of the Skykomish tribal territory. And they just did so willy-nilly. And, of course, that wasn't just the city of Tacoma. I mean, in terms of taking lands away from native peoples, that was common throughout the country, as we well know. So it just isn't the city of Tacoma. But I will say, on a positive note, after much litigation, potential litigation about relicensing those dams, challenged by the Skykomish tribe, the tribe's position was, tear down those dams. They're an obscenity. Tear them down. That was the position of the tribe. And there was litigation with the Tacoma Public Utilities, and the utilities worked out an agreement with the tribal nation to essentially mitigate and restore the salmon runs and still maintain those dams as they've done. A remarkable achievement covered in considerable length in this book. And I'll leave you with this small world story. So when I had the great pleasure and honor and privilege of serving as your mayor, the 37th mayor back in the day, toward the end of my term, I had occasion to meet with the tribal leaders of the Skykomish tribal nation. And the chair of the tribal council was Joseph Payville. And I walked up to Joseph Payville and I shook his hand. Mr. Payville, I want to introduce myself. you know, I taught at the University of Puget Sound. One of my students was your brother, who's one heck of a football player. And I want you to know that I had the honor of honoring your brother when he applied for graduate school. And he kind of looked at me like, you know, what's this guy saying anyway? Where's this guy coming from? You know, and he gave me kind of a very odd look. And a week later, I got a phone call. The other end of the line, a person said, Professor Barsma, this is Michael Payville. My brother called. I put in the good word for you, Professor. Small world. So in any event, it's an incredible story. You know, I've often thought, how did they do these things back in those days? How? You know? How did they go through, how did the Northern Pacific Railroad go through the Cascades in 1888? How did they do that with the technology that they had? And what they had to deal with in terms of the area there, getting through that mountain range. This happens to be, by the way, this year happens to be the 150th anniversary, in case you're wondering, 150th anniversary of the Northern Pacific reaching the city of Tacoma, December 16th, 1873. Digress here for a moment. It's all connected. In 1873, and declared the city of Tacoma. They created New Tacoma, declaring it as the terminus of the second transcontinental railroad, which came to Tacoma. And little aside, Abraham Lincoln signed the franchise for the Northern Pacific to build that line from Duluth. Abraham Lincoln always wanted to see the Pacific, and if he hadn't been murdered in April of 1865, I think he may have taken the Northern Pacific line to where? The city of destiny, Tacoma. I think we would have seen Abraham Lincoln visit us if he had lived because of that desire that he had. So that's an important part of Tacoma's history as well. It was in 1893, by the way, that the citizens of Tacoma purchased from Charles Wright Tacoma City Light and Water. And so we've had that utility since 1893, I want you to know, since 1893. And initially it was because of water was the big issue, and the water resource was a major issue. And then of course later electricity became a major issue as well. So this is an incredible project. This building, and I want to express my appreciation to the council members who've gone on the record, by the way. Thank you, council members who are on the record to make something special for this building, for the community. Thank you for being on the record, because it's going to take, thank you very much. Once you get on the record, Mr. Council members, Mr. Council members, it's Mr. and Ms. Once you're on the record, of course, you're on the record. You're on the record, as I well know, having been there where you're at, both as a council member and as a mayor. This is a terrific building, absolutely phenomenal. You can read about it. Of course, that building itself is an engineering marvel, by the way. It's a part of this whole story. So that's just one of the many stories of this great city, the city of destiny. And as I say, the rest is history. Thank you very much.
Wow, there we go. Thank you, Dr. Barsma. We really appreciate it. Are you sticking around for a little while if people have questions? Appreciate that. All right, ladies and gentlemen, today we're kicking it off. And if we've learned anything from this microphone, it's the importance of reliable power. While you're cruising around here today, free ice cream for children. There is a video playing down here which gives a summation of this project. You can avail yourself to the abundance of resources about this, and I myself, every hour, I'm going to start right here and give not a deep dive, but a light snorkel on the history of this building. So if you're curious about it, I'll do a little walking tour, and then we'll go from there. Hope you have a fantastic day. We're now going to give a round of applause for the Happy Sinners as they take us back to a simpler time. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for coming out.